The difference between a will and a trust is that a trust is an entity. A trust is just like an LLC, just like a corporation. A trust can own your assets. A trust will stand on its own alone. So you and I, we're entities. We have names, we have socials, we can own things. A trust is seen separate from us. So it's seen right next to us as a separate entity. So it has a name, it has an EIN, it can own a bank account, it can build credit, it can do all of these things that we can do as humans. A will cannot do that. A will can't do nothing. It can't own anything, it can't get a bank account, it can't get an EIN or anything. So that is the major difference.
Hey, family. This is Che Willis coming back with another episode of Wealth is a Journey podcast. Guys, this is episode 97. 97 weeks of consistency, 97 weeks of getting it done, giving good information. If you are a first-time listener, watcher, or subscriber, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for joining us, excuse me. On this podcast, we talk about faith, family, and finances, among other things. If you are a return watcher, listener, or subscriber, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully, we are adding value to your lives on the way to the M's. Because as always, we are on the way to the M's. So today, speaking of M's, I have an esteemed guest that's going to help us get there faster and help us protect the M's once we get to them. We have Christina Ivette. Let's go, clap it up. Let's go. Christina, thank you so much for joining us. We definitely appreciate you. And I think that this is going to be an amazing conversation already. We got connected through CEO Josh Earl. So shout out to my guy, Josh Earl. Thank you so much for connecting us. And I feel like this conversation has to happen today, talking about trust and all the things surrounding that. So, Christina, if you wouldn't mind, just go ahead and introduce yourself. Just give it a small snapshot of who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me on the podcast. I'm so excited to be here today and just to drop some gems for the community. So my name is Christina Ivette. I am the brand founder of 7 Ways to Wealth. And in 7 Ways to Wealth, we teach people how to protect their assets, how to grow their wealth, and how to preserve it using trust entities. So a lot of people don't know about trust. They've heard little terms like trust fund baby. And so we teach them the tools that they need to actually create the generational wealth.
Let's go. Let's go. So, Christina, what I want to know first is what was your first introduction to money, like growing up? Did they teach you about money, or are you kind of like everybody else trying to had to figure out money as you grew up?
That's a really good question. So with my family, I really had to figure it out on my own. They didn't really teach me any of the fundamentals that I needed regarding budgeting, saving, or investing. Growing up, I did see my father invest in real estate. And so that's why that ended up being my first investment because I saw my father flipping houses. And so a decade later, I got into flipping houses as well. But sometimes when it comes to your parents and stuff, they're not going to let you know their business and, how they're making money. And so for me, it was a struggle. And I'm like, okay, I don't really know like what to do. So I ended up getting a job fairly early. When I was 14 years old, I started working at McDonald's.
Okay.
And I would honestly say that that was the spark of how money works, how business works. I was 14 years old talking to like the CEOs and CFOs of the franchise. And I was literally like face to face, eye to eye, very bold. And I'm like, how do I get in? how do I become a franchisee? And so they was breaking it down to me. And they're like, you need $500,000, and you also need to work inside of the business. So you got to work your way up. You need to know how to flip burgers and make fries. And so I'm like, okay, I can do that. Check, check, check. So that was my first, foundation as a teenager to see how is money made, how to run a business, and then later on, how money can actually make money for you if you put it in the right place.
Man, I listen, man, that is an amazing answer. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because most teenagers will say, McDonald's, I'm not working there. But if you can learn the foundational principles of how a business is run and then talk to the right people, you can be out of here. But a lot of people will say, no, I'm not working at McDonald's. That's McDonald's is beneath me. But you
Right.
took a twist on that, and that's the first time I've ever heard somebody like put a twist on something like that. And that's awesome.
Yeah, I loved it. Honestly, I think that it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, and I would not change it for the world. If you ask me, where do you want your first job to be? I'll say, put me back over there. Put me back in McDonald's, in fast food, like
Yeah,
where I was.
yeah. Now
So,
that's dope. I my first corporate job was at Enterprise Rent a Car.
ooh,
And
I love Enterprise.
bruh, it was tough. It was tough. I'm gonna tell you, man. You didn't make a lot of money, but you did learn how to run a business. Like once you became a branch manager and you're in the management trainee program and you're working your way up the ranks, you're washing cars in a shirt and tie. Back then, you were customer service. You're working on the P&L, collecting money. You're doing all the things that's going to help you be a successful business person. And although I didn't make a lot of money there, I learned so much information about how to run a business, which then got me into real estate as well. So, guys,
That's
do not
amazing.
let, yeah, don't let that go over your heads. Like, and even your kids, like, change their perspective on working at a menial job and get the lessons that they need to learn to possibly run a business on their own one day. Because you working at McDonald's, me working at Enterprise helped me and it helped you to get to where you are today, I'm sure.
I really do think so. I think that it actually set the foundation for our entrepreneur skills. It really, I think that that's where like the burning desire came from. It's like we didn't have a burning desire to run a business until we worked for another business. And then we saw the ins and outs from the inside and we're like, wait, I could do this. Like I can go on my own. I can start my own business and I can run it the way that they run it.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's great.
that's dope. So, so let's move a little bit further on. You pass McDonald's, you get into, did you go to college? Did you
Yeah,
like,
I did. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I went to college. So I started off at the University of Florida, and I thought I wanted to go into pharmacy, and then I realized that I hated chemistry and pharmacy wasn't for me. So then I later transitioned into nursing, and I loved it. So what ended up happening was for the University of Florida, you needed a 4.0 and I had a 3.7. So there was like no way. So I actually transitioned to Nova Southeastern University. So I went back home. So I'm from Florida. So I went back home to South Florida and I ended up getting my degree, my bachelor's of science in nursing. And I got into the corporate world, just, being a bedside nurse. And I started traveling like all over the country. And I ended up, doing that for 8 years.
Wow. So travel. So my wife is a nurse, by the way.
Yes, I love it. Shout out to your
Yes.
wife because I'm just like, we are like a sorority. Like, we're
Yes.
like this. Like, you cannot mess with us.
Yes, yes, yeah. My wife's a nurse, and just being able to take care of people, I feel like is a special skill. And I know growing up, if somebody said that I'm a nurse, I knew you was getting money.
Yes.
So so when she said that she was going to be a nurse, I'm like, okay, yeah, that checks one of the boxes. I'm gonna go ahead and try to keep her. And
Yes.
so I know traveling nursing is you get a lot more money than working in a hospital.
Yes.
So walk me through not really knowing about money and then getting a lot of money being a nurse. How was that transition?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, starting off in my nursing career in Florida, like they paying peanuts, to be honest with you. So like I started off making $21 an hour, and I was working 5 days a week because where I was working, it was short staff. So I was burnt out after the first year, and I was like, okay, like I'm barely making it here. So after that first job, I transitioned to another job, and I realized that I got a little bit of a raise. So I went from $21 to I think $25. And I'm like, okay, a couple dollars more, but my paycheck looked the same. So I'm like, how am I going to make more money? So now I'm in my second year of nursing, and one of my coworkers, she's like, you need to head to California. And I'm like, why? And so I did my research, and I found out that California is the highest paying state for nurses. So my eyes lit up like a Christmas tree, and I was like, okay, I do need to make it to California. So I applied for my California license because I could only practice in Florida at the time. And and so I applied, got it within 6 weeks. And after that, I went to LA. So after 2.5 years of being in Florida, I traveled to LA. Immediately I started making six figures. It was crazy. I started making six figures. So I went from making like 50, 60,000 to making like 110,000 in that short period of time. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do with all this money? Right. And so in my mind, immediately I was like, I need to put into real estate because I was so obsessed with like real estate. And I knew that at that time, I knew it was going to be like my first investment. I'm like, if I'm going to park my money anywhere, it's going to be in real estate.
Mm.
So I'm just like I'm a Zillow junkie. So I'm just like on my lunch break, I'm looking at Zillow, looking at properties and stuff like that. But I just knew that I needed to, save. I also needed to put that money to work for me because my career was so hard. Like, and because your wife is a nurse, is that like we work 12 hours, we're always on our feet, we're taking care of others, and so we're like depleted, we're not taking care of ourselves. And so I knew that I couldn't be in that career for a long time because I was seeing my coworkers were literally like 55, 60, 65 years old, and they were they had like health challenges and stuff like that. They were tired of it. And I'm like, I can't let that be me. Like, I'm young, I'm in my 20s. I can't do 40 years, in the hospital and wait until I'm 65 to retire. Because like my coworker, the one I'm talking about specifically, I'm like, why you don't retire? She's like, no, I'm waiting until I'm 67 and a half so I could get more money for Social Security. And I'm looking at her, I'm like, you've done your time. Like, you've done 40 years. Like, you are good. And she's like, no, I need that 67 and a half. That was her goal. Her mindset was just so stuck on that 65 wasn't enough for her. And I'm like, okay, like I can't let that happen to me. So to me, it wasn't about how much money I was making. It was about where I was putting it and how I was making my money work for me. That was the most important thing. I had to switch my mindset early on in my career so that I wouldn't blow the money. Because going from 50,000 to six figures like this, literally, like it felt like overnight. Like the minute that I walked into California, they were throwing money at me. So I was like, I need to be able to put this money, to work for me.
Sure. So I have a question here. I went from making a little bit of money and to making a little bit more money. I'm prefacing that because I have family and friends watching this, so they might be, I mean, might be pocket watching a little bit. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to say the dollar amount, but I went from making a little bit to making a little bit more, and then it was like, okay, I couldn't afford a lot of the things growing up, so now I'm going to run it up. I'm
Yeah.
going, I'm Gucci sandals, Louis Vuittons, this, that, Gucci rain boots I had, which was insane. Like I'm a grown man wearing rain boots. It's nuts. But I'm like, you know what? I can afford it. I'm buying whatever I want. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And my thing was, and I was in real estate a little bit, but my question to you was from not really knowing about money to then having the wherewithal to say, I'm going to park my money in bricks as opposed to, trying to run it up immediately because, whatever your situation was growing up. How did you know to do that? Like, who were you around? Were you listening to podcasts, read books? Like, what was the thing that got you in that mindset?
Oh, that's a really good question. So early on in my 20s, early 20s, I was going to like seminars and conferences. So like
Mhm.
my first conference, I was 23 years old. And I went to a real estate conference. It was one of the 3-day conferences like how they do now, right? But this was way back then. So went to a 3-day conference. They're talking about real estate and my mind clicked. And that's how I got like super passionate because I'm like, oh my goodness, like you could, you could build wealth with real estate. So because I was exposed to these conferences, and I've never stopped going to conferences. Like I just went to a conference maybe 2 weeks ago. So it's a habit now for me to get into these places, get into these rooms, right? Where I could just acquire more knowledge than I did yesterday. It's a standard for me. But it reminds me of being in college where you are, where you're in this big auditorium ready to learn, right? So that's why I feel like I feel like I'm in that space where it's like it's ingrained in me to do this, right? Another thing is books, right? Like one of the first books that I was really into was the Robert Kiyosaki book, like Rich Dad Poor Dad. That was a really good book, and I read it early in my 20s. Another book was the Donald Trump book, The Art of the Deal. I think that's the name of the book. And
Mhm.
so I was literally 23, 24, reading those books and just knowing, okay, Robert Kiyosaki is in real estate, Donald Trump is in real estate, Christina Ivette is in real estate. Like that's just what it was for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm like a sponge, right? Just trying to soak it all up, a little bit here, a little bit there, not all just, in one space or one author or one mentor or one trainer. But another thing that I wanted to touch on was mentorship because I got mentorship early on in my 20s. From 23 to 25, I was really trying to figure it out on my own. So I was reading the books, I was going to the seminars, and then I was also like watching TV, like HGTV and all that stuff, going on
Yeah.
to the blogs and everything like that. YouTube, I was doing a lot of that stuff. And then when I was 25, that's when I acquired my first property. And it just so happened that my hard money lender became a mentor. And I asked him, I wasn't afraid, right? So, and he, in a sense, he kind of like put it out there like, oh, if you get this loan from me, I'll teach you. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like a win-win situation. But then I invited him to, he actually ended up doing a boot camp. He did a boot camp. I invested in the boot camp. And so after the boot camp, I got the hard money loan for my first property. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to refund you for the boot camp. And I said, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Like, you don't have to do that. But he's like, oh, you got this loan from me. Like, I'm going to make money on the loan. I don't have to make money off you. And I said, okay, no problem. So I said, can I take you to lunch? And he's like, yeah, sure. So we were at this pizzeria and I looked him in the eye as he was eating and I looked him face to face and I'm like, can you be my mentor? Because all he was doing was just boot camps and hard money. That's it. And so he looked at me and he was like, you could tell on his face, he was like, I don't know how to answer this question, but she's so bold. And, you know, I can't say no. So he didn't say no. So he said yes. So he said yes. And so he has been my mentor for almost a decade now.
That's
I'm gonna be 35 in 2 days, so 10 years.
well, happy birthday.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I want to go back to something that you had said earlier that I'm now, I mean, I kind of knew before, but now I'm starting to really realize it. Like I'm in a mentorship, the morning meetup, right? Like Josh Earl.
Yeah.
And that is a phenomenal place to be around like-minded people, entrepreneurs moving in the same direction. Now, I was always against going to conferences. Like I'm not going to conferences. I already know what to do. I went to a conference a couple weeks ago, and I'm here to tell you I was wrong. That was the most amazing conference that I've only been to one, and that was it. But I'm completely on board with going to conferences now because I feel like it can shortcut you and fast track you to where you want to go financially, and things of that nature. It was the My First Million conference with David and Donnie.
Oh, yes, yes,
It
I
was,
saw.
yeah, it was awesome. It was
Wow.
awesome, man. So how important was that? I know you already touched on it, but how I want I want to drive this point home. How important it is to go to conferences, to be around like-minded people, in your development.
It it is so vitally important, honestly. Like it will change your entire life. My first conference when I was 23 years old, it changed my entire life. My life is not the same and it would not have been the same. Like if I didn't go to that conference, I don't think that I would be here where I am today,
Yeah,
honestly. That conference is what sparked the flame for me to go set up my LLC and for me to get registered with my business and for me to actually become an entrepreneur. I was in there with probably, let's just say it was 1,000 people, right? But everybody had the same mindset. Everybody was going in the same direction. Everybody had that same burning desire inside of them to want better or to start their own business, become entrepreneurs, owners, things like that. And so I knew I was one in the right circle of people, and I was in the right space where they're, teaching what they already accomplished, which is flipping houses, investing in real estate, things of that nature. And so that's why I still make it a point to go to conferences today. I probably this year I probably went to like 5 or 6 different conferences. And I just make it a habit. And I fly everywhere. I don't just only go to the local conferences. I've flown to, Vegas. I just went to a conference in Nigeria. Like I just flew 13 hours for a conference. And it was worth it because of the individual's hand. I bought his book and I shook his hand, right? And this is a person that I've seen on the internet, and he's like in Africa, he's like over here, he's like, what's that guy's name? Um, oh my God, his name escapes me.
was he on TV?
Cardone. He's like the Grant Cardone.
Grant Cardone. Yeah, yeah,
Like he's the Grant Cardone of Africa.
yeah. Okay.
So I've been following him for over a year. So now I get to go to the conference, shake his hand, buy his book, tell him a little bit about myself. He's like, email me whenever you want. I'm like, okay, there's an open door, right? There's an opportunity. And you have to, strike while the iron's hot. So that opportunity would have never come if I didn't go over there, if I didn't go out my way to fly 13 hours to another continent to go to a conference, a 3-day conference.
That's
That
dope,
is
man.
how important it is. It
Yeah,
will change your life.
yeah. That's awesome. And also, it's not just the people that are not just the people that are on the stages that can help change your life. It's the people in the room that you're sitting next to that can help change your life as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know what? That actually just happened to me at the podcast summit, right? You know, the podcast summit.
Yep.
So I don't have a podcast, but I went there with the intention on getting on other people's podcasts, right? And so I learned at that moment in time that it wasn't about the people on the stage, it was about the people sitting next to you left and right. because although the people on the stage had a podcast, the people to the left of me and to the right of me had a podcast. And that was my intention. And so I end up meeting JR, the guy that we're talking about. I end up meeting him there, and he's like, okay, yeah, I want to invite you to my podcast. I said, absolutely. He put it on the book so quick that I couldn't even, my head was spinning. That's how quick that he put it on the books. Right. And so we went and did the podcast, and then he allowed me to put it on my channel. Right. So I have a YouTube channel, and at that time, I would say that my YouTube channel probably had about 5,000 subscribers, let's just say. And so he allowed me to put it on my channel so that we could, cross-reference our community.
Yep.
And so I did. Now, it went viral on my channel because it had over 60 something thousand views like in the first week. It blew up. And so now it's driving a lot of traffic to my business, to where my business did 6 figures. And I'm like, wait a minute, my jaw is dropping because this has never happened to me. But what I realized is, one, my channel has never had a podcast episode on it before. So it was very rare for my channel. And then my channel doubled. It went from 5,000 all the way now has like over 14,000 subscribers. Just off of the one podcast. Just off of me going to the one podcast summit, and I just sat down next to a random guy that I didn't know, that he changed my life.
That's crazy.
I promise.
That is insane.
Yeah.
So you went from, so let's go back to the nursing piece. You went from being a nurse. When did you transition out of being a nurse, and when did you realize that, hey, I need to go? This is enough?
That's a really good question. So I love nursing, but like I said, and you should know this, because if your wife come home, she might be telling you about her shifts, right? So it's hard work, but it's corporate. You got managers, you got CEOs, you got patients, it's a lot of stress. So what ended up happening was, 2 years into me being a nurse, that's when I started my real estate investment company. And I started flipping houses. And I was flipping houses for the last 6 years of my career. So in my real estate company, I was making 6 figures off of it for the year, right? Because one deal would make me 6 figures. I would only get sweet deals that I would get probably anywhere between 30 upwards of 150,000 in profit for those deals. So I was making 6 figures in my real estate company, and I was also making 6 figures as a nurse. I was working in California at this time. Then 2020 comes around. 2020, the pandemic. It's just it's a very fearful time. And so I end up getting one of the first COVID patients in the country. So when COVID first came out, it was in California, it was in Washington, it was in these little states, right? And so the first COVID patient in California, actually in our region, like I got that patient. So I was very scared for my life because they didn't know what it was. And that was in March, right? Or that was like early in the year, February, March. So as the months keep going by, I start to see that they're literally like experimenting on these patients. Like they don't know what's going on. So they're throwing anything and everything at them. They're throwing them antifungals, antibiotics, virals. They didn't know what to treat it with. And so I'm seeing patients die left and right. I'm seeing entire families come and being taken out, and just the doctors not caring, other medical professionals. And so I was so tired of it. I was tired of it. And I was like, one, I don't want to catch this thing and bring it to my family. Two, like, I don't want to be a part of this. Like
Yeah.
this is just, so I had to make the decision. I was like, am I going to stay, in my career in the bedside, or am I just going to bet on myself and just leave and bet on myself? I'm already doing six figures in my business. So my business has already replaced my 9 to 5. Why do I have to be in my 9 to 5 anymore?
Sure.
Like I did what I was supposed to do. And so I made that decision to walk away from the bedside. And I walked away 4th of July, 2020, in the height of the pandemic, when they were paying nurses $125 to $150 an hour. It was unreal. It was unreal.
Wow.
Like, yeah, it was
But you're
unreal
risking your life at the same time too.
at the same time. Yep.
Gee whiz.
Mm.
So how did it go? You left your job, you're making a lot of money flipping houses. Now, the pandemic happens and people are locked down. So how did you make money during this time with flipping houses?
What's going on, family? This is Che Willis from Wealth as a Journey. Did you know that we just started a wealth building community? In this community, we meet once a month on Zoom. We discuss financial areas of opportunity. We discuss wins and strategies to get you to the M's. In anybody's wealth building journey, if you're just starting out, it can be super lonely and difficult. In this community, we're also going to hold you accountable to where you say you want to be. So if you need the accountability, if you need the family atmosphere, if you need help getting to your desired financial result, come join the community. My website is www.wealthisajourney.com. Join the community today to get to your financial result. Thank you.
Yeah. So real estate, it was still doing well. It was still booming. It was having its ups and downs. So I was very selective with the projects that I was getting into, and I ended up getting into a project that actually was very challenging for me because I had all these violations. It had a converted garage. Like I got hit with $50,000 in fines, and I was like, okay. I was like, I can't put all my eggs in one basket. This is the only thing that I'm doing right now. I need to be able to also like start another business, right? Or have another stream of income, a second, third, fourth stream of income. So my real estate business, it was stagnant,
Mhm.
but it was still paying the bills, thank God. So then I started another business. The other business that I started was a slingshot rental. So I saw it. I'm living in Miami. So I moved from California
Yeah, okay.
back to Miami, and in Miami, the three-wheel slingshots. Have you seen those?
Yep. Oh
So
yeah.
they're just now coming out and becoming popular. And so I was like, okay, I can park money this way. I can borrow money from my real estate investment company, and then I can acquire these assets, rent them out on South Beach, and start making money that way. Right. And so that's exactly what I did. And that business, it blew up. It was doing so, so, so well. But I saw that it was a liability. Why? Because people were crashing these things like crazy. Like one guy, I only had the slingshot for a week. It was Christmas time, and he ran right into a tree. And the passenger was like an 8-year-old girl that broke her arm. So I'm like, look at the liability that I'm facing, right?
Mhm.
And so thank God that my business is owned by a business trust. But at the end of the day, that could have been a lawsuit for me. Obviously, it wasn't, but it could have been. Then there was another case where there was an 18-year-old girl on South Beach, rented the slingshot, not even having it for 10 minutes, she runs into a restaurant. I'm like,
That's crazy.
yes,
Hold on, did she live? Before we start laughing, did
yes,
she live?
yes,
Okay,
everybody
cool.
lived. Everybody lived.
All right.
This girl, she just kept calling and calling and calling. She's like, she's facing all of this stuff with the lawyers because of the people she hit. She hit like 4 cars, like totaled them. ran into a restaurant, all this stuff. And so she's like, oh, it's your fault. And I said, well, and why is it my fault? And she's like, because you didn't teach me how to drive it. I said, driving a slingshot is like driving a car, right? So she's just going back and forth with me. And I'm like, okay, so all of the stress, even though the business did well, the business did over 350K in the first year.
Wow.
It was phenomenal. But the stress, the anxiety, the headaches, the potential liability, the lawsuits, all this stuff, it wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
It wasn't worth it. So that business ended up putting me in a position to where I'm like, let me write an ebook, teach people how to start this type of business, because I'm over here in South Beach, but people could do it in Atlanta, in DC, in Vegas. They could do it in other places. So I wrote an ebook, sold the ebook for $47, put it on my YouTube channel. The ebook did really well, and people just started soaking it up, and they started, creating their own slingshot rental companies based off of what I was teaching them. So then it put me in a space where it lit the light bulb. And when I'm telling you the light bulb was lit, it was LED, like anybody could see it. It lit the light bulb to where I understood and knew, and it was confirmation that whatever experience or knowledge that I have, I could package it up and sell it.
Yeah. That's
Yes.
awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Man, so you are a trust advisor. How did we transition from that to trust advisor? Like, how did that happen?
Okay, so I have been a trustee for almost 10 years, 9 years.
Okay.
And so the way that I became a trustee
Hold on.
was
First of all, what is a trustee for the lay people who don't know what a trustee is?
Awesome,
Please.
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So a trustee is a authorized representative for a trust. So a
Okay.
trust is an entity just like an LLC. And so with an LLC, you have an authorized member. So with a trust, you have a trustee, which is that person who's going to operate the trust, who's going to sign on behalf of the trust, who's going to do everything that the trust needs as far as managing the assets that have been placed in the trust.
Okay. And then you were a trustee for, I'm assuming, your parents or.
No, for myself.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I end up setting up a trust for my very first property. So let's rewind to 2015, where I was in my career for 2 years, and that's right before I went to California. So at that point, that's when I bought my first property. And my first property, remember I told you that the guy that I asked him to be my mentor, I had went to his boot camp, and he offered me a hard money loan. I accepted the loan, and I used it to purchase my first property. I asked him to be my mentor.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about trust. So when we were at the boot camp, he was talking about trust. When I asked him to be my mentor, and now I'm in very close proximity with him, he's like, you need to put that property into a trust. And I'm like, what is a trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he's the first person that I ever heard it from. I never heard it before.
Okay.
So I'm like, what is a trust? So then he begins to tell me, and then that what is a trust? Then he tells me that all of his properties, and he had over 2,000 properties. He said all of his properties are in a trust. And I'm
Wow.
like, and my jaw is to the floor. I'm 25 years old, young, don't know nothing. So I'm like, wait a minute. Like, if you got 2,000 properties, if you my hard money lender and you got liquid capital like that,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm gonna follow what you say.
Yeah.
And
So
so
what? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, so he just pointed me to the right direction. I set up my trust. I put that property into a trust.
Okay.
And every single property that I've ever owned from 2015 until now has been in a trust.
Beautiful. Now, some people will say, okay, well, I have a will. I'm good. What is the difference between a will and a trust? If you can just kind of just break it down in the most elementary way, please.
I love it. I love it. And that's how I teach. I teach in elementary. That's what they taught us as nurses. They're like, don't be using those big words.
For sure.
Right. Like, don't say acetaminophen, say Tylenol. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. right?
Yeah, before you start, that reminded me of something. I helped my wife study for her nursing thing, and I felt stupid because I'm trying to read these words. I'm like, what does this mean? It's mad long. I'm like, I have
So,
no idea. I'm gonna try to sound it out, and then you give me the definition. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
exactly, exactly. So that's how they taught us. So that's how I teach. I break everything down into elementary level. So when you are asking about a will, automatically, I always tell people this. A will is a wish list. So a will is your last will and testament where you're actually telling people how you want your estate to be split up, right? If you have children, who you want to care for them. If you also want to put any last medical directions in there, you can, right? So a will is a legal form, and what ends up happening is when you transition, they'll go straight to the will for those instructions, right?
Mhm.
Now, the difference between a will and a trust is that a trust is an entity. A trust is just like an LLC, just like a corporation. A trust can own your assets. A trust will stand on its own alone. So you and I, we're entities. We have names, we have socials, we can own things. A trust is seen separate from us. So it's seen right next to us as a separate entity. So it has a name, it has an EIN, it can own a bank account, it can build credit, it can do all of these things that we can do as humans. A will cannot do that. A will can't do nothing. It can't own anything, it can't get a bank account, it can't get an EIN or anything. So that is the major difference. Every single thing that's inside of your will, meaning all of those directions, those instructions, those provisions, you can put it inside of the trust. And then that will becomes obsolete. You don't need the will because you have the trust with all of the instructions in it.
Got it. Okay, that's good. This is good. All right, cool.
Yes.
So, at what point would it make sense for somebody to get a will? So let's say that you have somebody who's well off and you have somebody who's not so well off. Would you say that the person that's well off to get the will and the person who's not well off I'm sorry, a trust, and the person who's not well off to not get the trust? At what point would somebody want to get a trust, or would you direct somebody to get a trust?
Yeah, so I would tell anybody and everybody you need a trust. It doesn't matter if you got $1 in your bank account or if you got $1 million in your bank account. You need a trust, especially if you have assets. So there's two type of people. There's people who already have assets, they definitely need a trust, or
Mhm.
there's people who are going to acquire assets in the future. So you're going to need to set up a trust because that trust is going to be the owner of your future assets. So I would tell anybody, there's a big misconception out here in society that you need to have $1 million, that you need to be a millionaire in order to have a trust. That is the biggest, fattest lie ever. You don't, right? You can start a trust with as little as $1, right? With a little as $100, you can go down to, any bank. You can open up a trust fund. You can fund it with $100. It doesn't have to be these millions and millions of dollars. And a trust is a contract. You can set up your own contract, right? You don't have to go to an attorney in order to set it up. So that's why there's so much misinformation, because a lot of people think I have to go to an attorney, I have to spend, 10, 15, $20,000, and then I have to set up a trust fund that's going to, require $1 million, right? So that is not the case. So I personally, will not tell anybody to set up a will if you have the means and ability to set up a trust. Meaning, if you have the ability to set up your own trust estate contract, go straight for the contract, because the difference between the two is that a will is going to end up in probate. That means that it's going to ensure. So if you only do one, meaning I've decided I'm only going to do a will and not a trust, you're going to end up in probate. So that means that
And that means in a court.
Yes, probate.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so you're going to end up in probate court where the state where you live, where you're a resident, right? So let's just say you're a resident of Texas. The state of Texas is going to create an estate for you, and then they're going to place all of your assets in that estate that they set up for you, and then they'll briefly glance at the will, but everything is going to be up to the judge now. It's going to be the judge's decision what happens with the assets that you have.
Wow. That's why I'm glad you're here. This is why I'm glad you're here.
Yes, you don't want that to happen.
Yeah. Because some people would think that, hey, I have a will, I'm good. I live in whatever state that I'm in, I'm straight. I don't need a trust. So I'm glad that you're here to kind of break down this thing. So my question to you is, walk me through the steps that you took to start your first trust.
Absolutely. So when I first set up my trust, I went to a trust institution. So it was an online institution where they provide you with the trust templates. And the first trust that I set up was a land trust. It was specifically for that one property. So the name that I put on that trust was the actual address of the home. So I just used the online template. I went and did the videos that the institution provided, and I got it notarized. And then after that, I just started operating it. So the first thing I did was place that property into the trust. So I had already closed on the property in my LLC name, but I already knew that I was at risk because the thing when it comes to flipping houses is that anything could happen. People could get injured. It's a scary thing. Like I've had people got injured in my properties. And so I didn't want that to pretty much make or break, my first business and my first property, and that be the determining factor for if I make money or if I don't make money. So that's why I did the quit claim deed, and I quit claim deed that property from my LLC into the name of my trust. And then from there, I just started operating the trust. So I opened up a bank account, and then all of the funds that I needed for renovation, I placed into that trust, and then the trust will go ahead and pay the contractors. And so that's how I started operation. And I started getting into the flow of things because it's just like operating a business. At first, you don't know what you're doing, right? So you just set up the LLC and you start figuring things out when it comes to business. But then as you start operating and start doing business deals and start, building up, getting assets and stuff like that, then you get familiar with the ins and outs of running these entities. And so that was the same thing with me.
That's awesome. So if you ended up, God forbid, you ended up passing away, what happens to the actual trust? Does it go to your kids? Who does it go to?
That's a really good question. So with any trust, you need a successor trustee. So I'm the trustee of my trust. I'm the only trustee on my trust. My successor is my sister. So she's 27 years old. And I've been teaching her about trusteeship. So she knows how to operate a trust. I've already told her, I've given her instructions. So if anything were to happen to me where I didn't wake up tomorrow, I have someone in place that's going to literally take over, and they're going to pick up where I left off. So she will then become the trustee of my trust because I've listed her as my successor. And then she's going to start operating my trust. So my trust, it has a lot of assets in it. So she's going to start managing those assets. And then depending on which trust, because I have multiple, if it's my family trust, then my children are listed as the beneficiaries. So then she'll be able to handle their affairs because she is what we call the fiduciary. So she's responsible for them. So if they need, college tuition, if they need, to buy a car or anything like that, she's able to use trust funds in order to pay for those things, or she could just issue them distributions so they can get money to be able to handle their, their affairs.
Okay.
So it's already set up. Which is a good thing, which is what you want. The trust is designed to outlive you.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So all the instructions on how you want things laid out for them, distribution wise, like say you want them to have 10,000 a month, she can't give them 15,000 a month because the trust that you set up already says that they're only getting 10. Is that correct?
That is correct. It depends on the type of trust. So what you're explaining is called spendthrift provisions. So that means that you are dictating, which I love, right? This is what we need to do. We need to control the money from the grave. So if you're saying, hey, they're only going to get 10,000, that's a good thing. And so if you have already put that provision in there, then that's what she's going to do. She's going to give them 10,000. But she has the discretion to be able to give them 11 or 12 or 13 if they need it, right? So if there's some kind of unexpected event, if there's an emergency, or if you didn't even factor in inflation, if it's like 10,000 is not going to do anything for them, they need 15, she has the discretion to be able to make the decision to provide more if it's needed.
That's awesome. So you would recommend, let's just say tomorrow I go get a trust and get it notarized and it's all done. You would recommend the person who I'm entrusting, I forget the verbiage that you said, the person I'm giving, or what's your sister?
Successor.
There you go, the successor, yes. So
Yes.
the successor, you would recommend that I teach them everything, all the ins and outs of the trust.
Yes,
Okay.
you definitely want to, because you want them to be qualified, because in this trust world, there has been so many trustees that are not qualified, and they end up blowing the money that's inside of the trust.
Really?
Mismanaging. Yeah, because the trustee is the one that actually invests the funds or manages the assets. So if they're mismanaging, if they're what we call grossly negligent, then the wealth inside of the trust starts to dissipate because of them.
So how do you manage that from the grave? If you already set these things up in place and then they end up mismanaging money, how do you then manage it from the grave, as you said before? How does
Yeah,
that happen?
so inside of the trust, there are provisions in there that says that the trustee can be removed if they're grossly negligent, if they're drunk, if they have alternative lifestyle, right? If they are not doing what they're supposed to do, they could be removed and replaced with somebody else. So you want to take those actions early on versus later.
Sure.
Another position that a lot of people don't know about inside of a trust is a protector position. So the protector is an individual that is not related to the trustee and not related to the beneficiaries, right? And so
Mhm.
that individual is going to protect the beneficiaries in a sense from the trustee to make sure that the trustee doesn't do that. So the moment that the protector is getting some type of inclination that the trustee is not managing the trust efficiently and effectively, they can remove the trustee. And that's definitely what you want. And
Mhm.
so in order to avoid that, you definitely want a protector. You definitely want to place a protector inside of your trust, but you want to do
Sure.
it like not now, right? I don't need a protector right now today, because they're just going to be watching me and I know that I'm operating effectively. But 15 years when I'm ready to retire, then absolutely I'm going to want to appoint a protector.
So the protector is kind of like a security guard.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
So
Yeah.
wait, so you're saying that they can remove you as well as the
Yes.
protector? That's
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah, that's their job. I know. I was just watching a video, and inside of the video, they were asking Kanye West, "Do you need a board of directors?" He was like, "No way," because he knows that his board of directors could remove
Uh,
him.
uh,
Right. So, it's that's what I'm saying. So it's optional. So you're not going to want to put a protector right now, but in 20 years, when you're ready to go, you're going to want to put a protector to watch your successor.
got it. And this is awesome, man, because I think a lot of people think that you need hundreds of thousands of dollars to start a trust or to open one up, and that's what I've always believed. I've been to webinars where
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, it's just $10,000. We'll get you set up. We'll soup the nuts. We'll take care of you, and you're good. I'm like, fam, I mean, that's a little bit of change, man. Like,
Yeah,
but
a
you're
lot.
saying that you can open one up for less than $100 or about $100. I think that'll make a lot of people feel better about setting one up, especially if they have assets.
Yeah, you want to protect your assets. You want to get a trust as soon as possible. So it only costs a couple $100 in order to open up this trust. It depends on the bank that you go with, right? So Truist is $100, Wells Fargo, Chase, $500, Navy Federal, $300. So it just depends, right? But that's the minimum that's required in order to open up that bank account. So that is what's considered a trust fund. So when you hear the terms for trust fund, they're talking about the bank account that's associated with the trust. But the trust is a contract. So that's a separate fee, right, from actually setting up the contract. So you got to set up that contract. And so a lot of people are charging thousands of dollars to set up the contract. But you can create your own contract. I've seen a lot of people do it as well.
Okay. All right, that's good. So as a trust advisor, do you set up the trust or are you kind of like a broker, like kind of like a mortgage broker? You don't actually do the thing, you just point them in the right direction.
That's a really good question. So I actually teach people how to set up their own trust. So that's what I do. I have a program. It's called Wealthy Trustee. So I teach people how to create their own trust contracts. We provide them with the templates and they have to customize it. So everyone has a different business. So if we're going to give you the templates for a business trust, you have to customize it specifically for your business, right? Your business is different from my business. Then we provide them with a second type of trust, which is an asset holding trust that's for their family. So that means that you're going to place the assets in there that has nothing to do with business. So that means you're going to place your primary residence in there, any jewelry that you have, cash money, your insurance policies, your cryptocurrency, stocks, bonds, all of those things. And you're going to list your children as the beneficiary of that type of trust. So your business is specifically only for business and investments. So that's where you're going to place your LLCs and your corporations. And then the last type of trust that we help them with is a nonprofit. So we strongly believe that you need a for-profit and a nonprofit if you want to play this game the right way. And save as much taxes as possible. So with the nonprofit, that's where you're going to do all of your, charitable or philanthropic endeavors, or you can do more education-based things, and it's exempt from federal income taxes. So those are the three trusts that we provide people with, the templates, and we teach them how to customize it. We teach them pretty much A to Z. So how to open up a bank account, how to transfer their house, their cars, their businesses, how to get insurance policies so that you can marry the insurance policy with the trust so that you can start to preserve the wealth that's in there. And pretty much that's it, like just the ins and outs, how to have board meetings, stuff like that, right? Because a lot of people, they're operating entities, but they're not having board meetings for it. So it's like we're gonna show you how to do it the right way, not the wrong way.
That's good. You had mentioned something about taxes, and then a lot of times you hear about wealth strategies, and then you hear about trust being able to shield you from being taxed a lot. Is there a little bit of information without, I don't want to get you in trouble, but is there any information that you can give the audience about why that's important from a tax perspective to have a
Yeah,
trust?
yeah, absolutely. So, a trust is definitely like what we call like a tax haven, right? It's a beautiful entity because it's very different from us as humans. Us as humans, we pay taxes first and we receive the leftovers. And a trust is actually going to spend the money first and they're taxed on the leftovers. So that's the type of position that you want to put yourself in, to where you're placing all of these assets like your house, like your car, like, your insurance policies, things like that, right? So
Mhm.
normally you would pay for your house, your car, your insurance policy out of your own personal funds, right? And so though all of those things are not tax deductible on the personal side, but if those assets are owned by the trust, then they become 100% tax deductible. So just imagine your house being in the trust, but then you get to deduct your mortgage, your insurance, maintenance, utilities, anything and everything that's associated with that asset, everything that's
Wow.
associated with the asset, right? For even like your insurance policies, right? So the premium payments is deductible with your vehicle, right? Car payments plus the insurance payments plus maintenance and stuff like that. So all of those things are 100% deductible for the taxes for the trust fund because those assets are owned directly by the trust and they're considered administrative or operating expenses for the trust.
Beautiful. Question. Now, I got a better question.
Yeah.
What if you don't have any payments?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way that you can still shield yourself from, because some people don't have mortgages, car payments, whatever, and can you still be shielded from the government? I mean, because now,
Oh yeah,
okay,
yeah,
all right,
yeah.
okay, cool.
You don't need to have payments. So ideally, even if you don't have a mortgage or a car note or any of those things, you still want those assets to be directly owned by the trust because the number one thing that you're going to avoid is probate. Probate is inevitable.
Mhm.
And a lot of our children, a lot of the next generation, our heirs, they're losing their inheritance
Mhm.
literally to the government. The government is taking away your house and auctioning off on the county steps. And we don't know that. We automatically in our mind think, my house is going to go directly to my son. When your son is never going to see that house, they're going to fight for months, even years to keep mom's house. And then the judge is going to decide to sell it because they have to pay off Medicare, Medicaid, and the hospital bills that you didn't even know that you was going to rack up at the end.
Man, man, this is good. So let me just make sure I got all this. We get the trust. We get the what's your sister again, please? I'm sorry.
Successor.
Successor. We get the
Yeah.
successor. We get the bouncer or the security guard.
Yeah. The
Do we
protect.
do we need anything else to set this thing up?
No, but your children are your beneficiaries. So
Okay.
your children are your beneficiaries. And then you also need a grantor, which is a person who's going to create the trust, right? So, that could be you if you get a revocable trust, or if you get an irrevocable trust, then it can't be you. It has to be somebody else.
Okay. Now, okay. I know, but we're deep diving.
Let's
What's the
go.
what's the difference between the revocable and the irrevocable?
That's a really good question. So with a revocable trust, the grantor and the trustee are the same person. Okay.
So that
So
would be you.
yes. So
Okay. All right.
I am the grantor and the trustee. So that means that the grantor has revocability. So that means that they can make changes to the trust. So they can make changes inside of the trust contract. They could remove the beneficiaries or the trustees. They could also put assets in and remove those assets out. And if they decided that they wanted to terminate the trust, they can terminate the trust at any point in time. Because the grantor and the trustee are the same person, creditors can come after the revocable trust. So the assets that you're placing inside a revocable trust are not protected.
Mm.
Not protected. So unfortunately, if the beneficiaries were to decide to contest the trust, then the trust could end up in probate. And that's definitely not what you want. Because once it goes to court, they pierce through the trust, anybody and everybody could see the contents of the trust. So that's what a revocable trust. Now, on the contrary to that, you have an irrevocable trust. So the irrevocable trust means that the grantor and the trustee are not the same person. They're two different individuals. And the grantor has what we call irrevocability. So that means that once they set up the trust, that's it. They have no power and no control over the trust. So they cannot make changes to the trust. They can't terminate the trust. They can't remove trustees or beneficiaries. And if they were to place assets in there, they can't pull those assets out. So if you are operating that type of trust, your assets are fully protected. So creditors for the grantor, the trustee, cannot come after an irrevocable trust. It's very, very, very hard. And if they were to try and it was to end up in court, the judge would decide not to pierce through an irrevocable trust, which is definitely what you want, because that's the whole point of asset protection, is to get the best type of trust where your assets are fully protected. So with this type of trust, you want an irrevocable trust, but you don't want to be the grantor, because the grantor has no power and control. So you want to be the trustee.
So you would say if it's a husband and wife, who would you say to be one or the other? Because if they're both your assets, one can't make a decision, but the other one can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so whoever doesn't want to control the asset anymore, they could be the grantor. Or you could choose someone that's not the husband and wife. So you could choose like a sibling or a parent. Usually those are good options.
Okay. But working with you, you would be able to walk somebody through who to pick based on whatever their current situation is.
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. Very good. This has been awesome.
Yes, I
This has been
agree.
this has
So,
been awesome.
so
This is
awesome.
good. Yes, this is good.
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much more we could talk about, but I know your time is valuable, and I feel like maybe we need to have you back again in
Yeah,
2025, maybe
for
deeper in
sure.
2025. We can run through even more stuff because I feel like every time you talk, I just want to ask another question and then another question. And so but I appreciate the wealth of information that you've given me and the audience. And to work with you, I'm going to put all your information in the description. But if you wouldn't mind, if you have a website, if you have IG or anything like that, if you just want to talk to the people and tell them where to find you at.
Yeah, absolutely. So the brand is Seven Ways to Wealth. So you could definitely Google us. It's the number 7 ways to wealth. And the website is wealthytrustee.com. And you could definitely visit us on social media. So we're definitely on YouTube. So if you want to learn a little bit more, because we only had an hour here, then go to our YouTube channel, 7 Ways to Wealth. And then you can, dive into some educational videos that we have over there. And then on social media, you can find me at I am Christina Ivette. Thank you so
Let's
much.
go.
Yeah.
I just started and this is selfish. I just started a community, a wealth builders community. And if you wouldn't mind, I would like you to be a guest speaker on there. We meet for like an hour once a month. And we talk about wealth building, we talk about budgeting, we talk about all the things surrounding wealth building. And I feel like having this conversation is important.
Yes, it
So,
totally is. You have my yes for sure.
okay, very good, very good. Okay, I listen, I appreciate you.
Yes, I
I
appreciate you
appreciate you.
too. This
Yes.
is so wonderful. Thank you.
Yes. This was dope. This was dope. And you will 100% be back and thank you for what you're doing and educating people because there's a lot of fear with the trust and I had fear. So you calmed me down a little bit and I appreciate
Yay.
that. So
That's awesome. Well, I'm on my mission, so I'm here to help as many families as possible.
absolutely. We out here adding value. We out here adding value. So thank you guys for tuning in. Wealth is a journey. We will see you next week. Peace.